Coming up with interesting and unique interview questions for your podcast isn't always easy, but asking engaging questions can be crucial to successfully hosting a guest on your podcast. We've got you covered. I'm going to share 9 great podcast interview questions to ask your next guest. So you've worked hard to connect with this person and ask them to be a guest on your podcast. And my guess is that's probably because you think they have something valuable to share with your audience. But the only way that your podcast audience is going to gain anything from this interview is if you ask the right questions. Podcasts with even the most interesting guests can fall flat if the interviewees have very little to work with. So the responsibility falls on you as the interviewer. That's why here at Wavve, we've put together a list of great interview questions to ask your next guest. Number 1, what's one thing you wish you would have known before you began your career? When preparing your interview questions, you want to think about not only your guest, but what your audience would be interested to learn from your guest. Oftentimes, listeners tune in because they're in the same field as your guest, or they want to be in that field. So this question provides value to that audience by providing insight into what a successful person wished they would have known going into it. Question number 2, what is your biggest failure and what did you learn from it? Now, it's fun to talk about successes, but we often don't get to hear about the hardships and the failures that person went through to get where they are now. This question can get your guests talking about something that they probably haven't shared very much before, and it can provide great perspective for your listeners on their own failures. This question also encourages vulnerability, which can be uncomfortable at times, but it can also help that person to connect with your audience on a deeper level. Question number 3, what advice would you give to someone trying to pursue a career similar to yours? The previous questions keep both your listener and your guest in mind, but this one provides direct value to your listener, and it can often result in some great sound bites that you can share later on social media. As a quick pro tip, you can share these sound bites on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook easily just by converting them into animated videos using Wavve. Be sure and check out Wavve in the comments below. Number 4, what are some great resources that have helped you along the way? This is yet another way for your guests to share some valuable information, and it allows your listeners to keep diving deeper. Another way to ask this is, what have you read or listened to recently that has inspired you? Plus, it's also great to get some other recommendations for books to read or podcasts to listen to. Number 5, who are the 3 people who have been most influential to you? This question gives them opportunities to share stories of people who have been really influential on their journey. It may be a mentor, a relative, or even someone from history who they've never met before. It's also good to put a limit to this question for 2 reasons. First, it guarantees that they're not going to spend too much time on this question and be too long-winded. Second, this can also help to guide your guest. If you simply ask who has been most influential in your life, some people may come with a list of 20 people, where others may list just 1. So asking just for 3 is a great happy medium. Question number 6, what is one myth about your industry or profession that you want to debunk? When you're passionate about something, there's a good chance that you really want to debunk any false information or any misconceptions about that subject. Most likely, your guest is going to jump at the opportunity to address these misconceptions and debunk that myth. All right, we're coming up on number 7, which is, if you were in my shoes, what question would you have asked yourself that I didn't? Now, this is a fairly uncommon question, and many podcast hosts may not want to admit that they may have missed a question that they could have asked. Unless you're also a top expert in the same field as them, there's a good chance that you may have missed something. This question really just acts as a free-for-all, and it just gives your guest the opportunity to talk about whatever they really want to. Question number 8, and this is a big one. Where can our listeners find you online? Remember, your podcast guest graciously agreed to come on your show to answer all these questions, so the very least that you can do is give them a chance to promote themselves. Allow them to plug their social media handles, their websites, maybe a book they're launching, whatever they want. I promise you, your guests will greatly appreciate it. And now for our very last point, you should create your own signature question. This is a question that you'll ask every single time to all your guests. Kurt Mercadante, who hosts the Freedom Club podcast, always asks his guests, what does freedom mean to you? And he has become known for it. Ending your podcast with your signature question provides a sense of continuity that people will come to expect. Thank you so much for watching. Are there any interview questions that you would add to this list? Be sure and mention it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get more podcast tips in the future. And finally, be sure and check out Wavve at wavve.co, where you can create animated podcast videos and promote your podcast on social media. Thanks so much, and keep creating.